Number 10. Undead Brother Voodoo. This version of Brother Voodoo hails from Earth 666, ooh spooky, where he is part of the Undead Avengers team. While still technically a hero, he's also still technically a monster. The Avengers of Earth 666 are all considered members of the Undead, with each of them technically being some kind of monster, some version of undead, if you will. Jericho Drum in this universe appears to be some kind of poltergeist-like ghost from his appearance here. I don't know if he's specifically a poltergeist, I just think of him that way because of his glowiness. I don't know, reminds me of the movie Poltergeist. This team, including the ghostly Brother Voodoo, make their first appearance in issue number 33 of the Secret Avengers series, where they tangle with Secret Avengers members Captain Britain and Clint Barton's Hawkeye of Earth 616.
Number 9. Groot. Before he was the mainstay lovable space ent in Guardians of the Galaxy with a raccoon-shaped compatriot, Groot was actually an evil, monstrous tree. He first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 13 in 1960. The tagline in the comic itself was, quote, "Where Groot walks, death follows." He was also entirely obscure before being thrust into the pop culture fandom when Marvel decided to turn their C-list team, Guardians of the Galaxy, into a phenomenally massive success. He was originally a throwaway monster, and his original comic, before 2012, was worth $2,868, which isn't small by any means, but after the movies premiered, it was worth $19,000. In the comic, Groot belongs to a species called Floral Colossus, although they're also just called Groots too. During his early life, the Floral Colossi rule over Planet X, and Groot was an outcast amongst his people. He became friends with the inferior species called the Undergrowth, a fungi-like species also on the planet. Groot is eventually forced to flee his homeworld after he kills another Colossus while defending an Undergrowth. Before the movies, Groot also appeared in 2 other comics, one being The Incredible Hulk, where he more so resembles his original appearance rather than the huggable tree we know today. The Hulk comic released in 1976, and then lastly he was in Annihilation Conquest number 6 in 2008. It was the first appearance of Groot as his modern rendition, smaller, skinnier, a bit more approachable than the Godzilla-style tree we knew before. He also joined the Guardians of the Galaxy lineup in this comic alongside Star-Lord, Drax the Destroyer, and Rocket Raccoon.
Number 8. Ultimate Hulk. Let's be real, when I think of multiversal monster versions of the Hulk, I often think of Ultimate Hulk of Earth 1610, aka the Ultimate Universe. Here Hulk was less a hero and more just, kind of a brute. In fact, at one point the Ultimates, who are basically this Earth's version of the Avengers, even had to fight against, not with the Hulk. The Hulk would eventually go on to join the Ultimates team, I'll give him that, but let's not forget that he's a cannibalistic beast who also makes some of the most violent threats when he's angry. Even Bruce Banner wasn't as altruistic in this universe, initially hoping to create the next super soldier serum so that he might be able to increase his own strength and power. However, instead he created a Hulk serum, which turned him into the Hulk because he was all about testing that serum on himself. It's even implied that during his first transformation that he may have actually caused the death of Mary and Richard Parker, the parents of Spider-Man. Peter Parker, so yeah.
Number 7. Marvel Zombies. It's an entire pantheon of characters, from Spider-Man to Hulk to Captain America, but all zombified. The zombie versions of beloved heroes were first introduced in the pages of Ultimate Fantastic Four and became instant hits. In typical Marvel marketing genius, Marvel spun the zombies into their own book written by none other than Robert Kirkman. Robert Kirkman is the same bearded guy behind a television show you might know called The Walking Dead. The comics ran from December 2005 to April 2006. It starts in an alternate Earth called Earth 2149, where an unknown hero crash lands from another dimension. He comes with a, quote, hunger, which infects the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four, along with basically every other major superhero you can think of. It's intense, and the adventures of the zombie heroes usually have more mayhem than most mainstream comics do in their entire run. It's all about damage and impact, and oh boy does Kirkman deliver on that. Peter Parker eats Aunt May. I'm serious, look it up. After an episode of the Disney Plus series called What If Zombies, there were talks of Disney also creating a spin-off series based on and named after the Marvel Zombies, so keep an eye out.
Number 6. The Yeti. This Yeti is relegated to another universe because of the series it appears in, which was intended to be, Good for young readers and children, and which was said to exist outside of the main continuity. This Yeti we are talking about here appears in Spidey Super Stories in issue 16. Oh boy. In this team-up book we see Spider-Man go on adventures that are more kid-friendly when it comes to reading, ideally therefore serving the purpose of helping kids learn how to read, which is important. The Yeti hails from Earth of 57780, and while he might seem like a monster by the end of the story, Spider-Man, also of Earth 57780, seems to have ascertained that the Yeti really is not a bad guy, but is just homesick. He's just stealing a lot of ice cream. So he attempts to help the Yeti by getting him safely home so he can be cold again. Yay.
Number 5, Morbius, the living vampire. It's Morbius' world and we're just living in it. He first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 101 in 1971. The story goes, in a desperate attempt to save his own life as he suffers from a rare blood disease, Dr. Mike Morbius turns to a cure that uses vampire bat DNA because of course he does. It mutates him into a half-vampire, half-human monster. It's Morbiclock out there, and Morbius was actually initially kind of a bad guy. He fought Spider-Man and Blade before becoming a vigilante justice sort of anti-hero who struggles with the insatiable lust for blood. He's also desperate to find the cure to his vampirism. Honestly, in the comics, Morbius looks way scarier and monstrous than the Laughingstock movie. I think it's one of those things where the cartoon and artistic medium is much better at portraying the monster than Jared Leto is.
Number 4. MCU Gargantos. Gargantos is one of the monsters from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that I thought, might be one of the big bads of that movie. Instead, I was wrong, and the beast was used simply as a distraction. Seemingly modeled after the comic book character Shuma-Gorath, Disney and Marvel decided against using the name of that character for copyright reasons, and so instead decided to use a name that solely belonged to them. Enter Gargantos. Although in the comics, Gargantos is less of a magical monster and instead is kinda like your typical multi-tentacled, one-eyed sea monster. In the film, it takes the combined efforts of Sorcerer Supreme Wong and Dr. Stephen Strange to defeat the beast, and Strange even pulls out some magical monster tricks of his own to stop Gargantos. While Gargantos appears in a multiversal film, him being based off of Shuma-Gorath would likely also make him a multiversal monster just straight up.
Number 3, Ghost Rider. Who could forget Johnny Blaze, one of the Ghost Riders set out to hunt down earthly baddies and drag them kicking and screaming to hell where they belong. The legacy of the Ghost Rider began in the pre-Marvel age with a ghostly cowboy who hunted the prairie of the American frontier. But the modern version is a stunt biker, Johnny Blaze, who becomes possessed by the demon Zarathos and becomes a flame-headed skeleton with a cool bike and fancy leather jacket, hunting down bad guys in the name of vengeance. At times, he's the bad guy himself, being the not polished hero that has no problem taking lives. At others, he fights with the other Marvel heroes to take down bigger foes. I mean, he looks badass, can we be honest here, and he's definitely one of my favorite Marvel monsters.
Number 2. Strange Supreme. Strange Supreme is the Dark Doctor Stephen Strange we see as is showcased in the Disney Plus What If streaming series in the season 1 episode What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands. In this episode, Strange becomes obsessed with getting back Christine Palmer after losing her in a car accident instead of, losing his hands, because Christine was his heart, get it? Because her death is considered an absolute point in time, the spirit of the Ancient One returns to Strange to remind him that he cannot do anything to bring her back. Strange doesn't like that answer and is like, I'm still gonna do stuff, so he gets split in twain, with one half of him choosing to do whatever it takes to get Christine back, because the Ancient One's like, I'm not gonna let that happen, just cut you in half. This prompts him to turn to the dark arts, absorbing various creatures and monsters from the universe in order to get as much power as is needed to reverse Christine's death. In the end, this Strange of the multiverse becomes more monster than man, defeating his other half by reabsorbing him and breaking the universe to bits when he disregards all warnings and brings Christine back to life anyways once more. Doesn't even work out well because Christine's like, dude, you're like super evil, I'm like not here for this.
Number 1, Shuma-Gorath. Quote, before all was, I was. Before time was, I waited. I fed on the screaming souls of the universe. I drank the spoiled milk of dead stars. I am the emptiness outside all understanding. I am Shuma-Gorath. Is a pretty sweet way to introduce yourself. His character design is next to none as one of the great old ones who first appeared in a 1972 comic called Journey into Mystery Volume 2. This tentacle monster more so looks like a freak of nature than a typical monster. He's the ruler of hundreds of dimensions and comes to the Earth realm millions of years ago along with the other old ones. Around 1 million BC, he was banished from Earth by a time traveler sorcerer named Sneg. It was witnessed by Doctor Strange, who hoped to defeat the Ancient One so his master didn't have to die, but obviously it never really works out like that. But then Shuma-Gorath reappears and becomes the main foe of Doctor Strange. While we can get into his whole villain arc with Doctor Strange, I would prefer to look at the other reality he appeared in with Earth 30847. He became an unlikely savior of Earth, and upon accepting that they thought of him as a hero, he ended up hosting a Japanese game show called the Super Monster Awesome Hour, which honestly, like, vibes.
And at number 10 is Werewolf by Night. Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night, made his Marvel debut in 1971's Marvel Spotlight number 2. He was actually born in Transylvania as Jacob Rusoff. Russell is a descendant of Grigory Rusoff, who in 1795 was turned into a werewolf after fighting Dracula. Grigory managed to keep the curse dormant for many generations until it was reactivated by Jack's grandfather, Gregor, using powers from a copy of the Darkhold. When under the full moon, the curse turns Gregor and his descendants into werewolves with supernatural abilities including enhanced strength, stamina, agility, reflexes, speed, senses, and durability, with a regenerative healing factor, but a weakness of silver. In his solo series from 1972, Jack fights threats like Dracula and enemies that either want to steal his abilities or steal his family's copy of the Darkhold. He even came into a famous conflict in issue number 32 in May of 1975 that introduced Moon Knight to Marvel Comics. He is also soon to be a part of the MCU alongside a few other monsters. Number 9. Frankencastle. After he was killed by Daken on orders from Norman Osborn during the Dark Reign event, Frankencastle, yes, the Punisher, was revived by the Legion of Monsters as an undead zombie-like monster known as Frankencastle. The Legion resurrected Frank to recruit him in their fight against the villain known as Hellsguard, who was systematically killing off monsters using samurai-like assassins. Although he originally refused to help, Frank got involved after seeing innocent younger monsters being dispatched too, and that is not something Frank is willing to abide. So he went on to slay hordes of Hellsguard's men. It's honestly an incredibly interesting moment in Frankencastle's history, and it got this version of Frank moved to Earth 666. He also nearly enacted revenge against Daken, being stopped by Wolverine before he was returned to his human form through the Bloodstone. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video and you aren't already subscribed, be sure to slap that subscribe button to see more lists and explanation videos all about comic book characters. Number 8. Nkonthu the Living Mummy. Nkonthu was the leader of a very strong tribe in the Sub-Sahara that was enslaved by the Egyptians around 3,000 years ago. After he led a revolt against the pharaoh and even took the pharaoh's life with a spear, Nkonthu was paralyzed by the pharaoh's sorcerer and mummified, but made immortal so as to suffer as a living mummy. Now, fast forward to the 20th century and the living mummy regained the ability to move again, and he clawed his way out of his slumber and terrorized Cairo until he was eventually seemingly defeated. Only not really, because he came back. The living mummy has actually acted as a hero as well. Quite a bit, honestly, helping out on many teams using his super strength, stamina, and durability, plus a form of immortality that doesn't let him die from anything except some physical attacks. Also, after being charged by Anubis, Nkonthu has apparently gained the ability to draw souls from sentient beings. Number 7. Sauron. Calling him a monster is a little unfair, but also not really. As a child, Dr. Carl Lycos was attacked by a mutated pterodon and somehow became an energy vampire, forced to absorb the life energy from animals and humans in order to survive. However, after absorbing energy from the mutant Havoc, the energy triggered his metamorphosis into a creature that resembled a half-humanoid pterodon, who retained his human intelligence and the ability to speak. However, the transformation distorted Lycos' personality, turning him evil. Hence, Lycos took the name Sauron after the arch-villain of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. He has come into many conflicts and alliances with various mutants, including the X-Men, over his history, and he eventually became conqueror of the Savage Land, which is a hidden refuge for dinosaurs nestled in the modern Antarctic. Number 6. Morbius. Yes, it is indeed Morbin time, my friends. As probably one of the most frequently occurring and now most memed Marvel monsters, Michael Morbius is a prominent figure for monsters and mystical beings in Marvel Comics. Suffering from a rare blood disease, Morbius turned to a cure that used vampire bat DNA. Now this mutated him into a blood-sucking creature of the night and a pseudo-vampire, with all the perks of vampirism minus the drawback, except for looking utterly terrifying. He was at first a villain doing battle against the likes of Spider-Man and of course Blade, but he eventually became a conflicted hero, using his abilities to help others while battling his bloodlust and trying to cure himself of his curse. Number 5. Dracula. Moving from a pseudo-vampire to the lord of all vampires. Dracula is an incredibly old vampire, sorcerer, and nobleman who became the supreme ruler of all vampires while also being the most powerful vampire of all time. The Wallachian Count Vlad turned himself into a vampire in order to face the invading Ottoman forces in the 1400s. Now minus the abilities native to most vampires, including superhuman attributes, hypnotism, immortality, and shapeshifting, Vlad is a sorcerer, and he has even the ability to control the weather to a degree that can even oppose both Storm of the X-Men and the god Thor. Recently, he has declared the site and surrounding area of Chernobyl the Vampire Kingdom. He used this seat of power to steal the blood of Wolverine that allowed Dracula to survive in sunlight for a limited time. But he has done so much more during his long run in Marvel Comics starting in 1950. Number 4. Fang Foom. He whose limbs shatter mountains and whose back scrapes the sun. Fang Foom is a member of a race of shape-shifting aliens from a world called Kakaranthara, or if you prefer the much easier Maklu 4. Foom was the navigator of the spacecraft that landed on Earth in ancient China, and he volunteered himself to be put in a tomb in a deep slumber to serve as a backup plan for the other Makluans to conquer Earth. Fang Foom looks a lot like a kind of humanized Chinese dragon when he is in his natural form, and is a massive shapeshifter from anywhere between 32 to 255 feet. As a dragon and alien, he possesses super strength, stamina, durability, and longevity, as well as telepathy and flight, spiritual possession, energy assimilation, acid mists, and potential transmogrification abilities. He has fought and allied with so many different heroes over his time, including a hilarious fight with the Hulk where he was thrown to the moon. Number 3. Zenmu. The alien cybernetic monster Zenmu is an incredibly intelligent being with a huge amount of strength and power. Introduced in Marvel Comics in 1960's Journey into Mystery, he is one of the first monsters introduced, and he even predates the Fantastic Four. Zenmu is able to cast hypnotic rays that can control the entire human population. He can use telekinesis, scatter his atoms, and even inhabit host bodies. In other words, Zenmu is incredibly powerful. Most recently, Zenmu was a foe to the Hulk in the Immortal Hulk series. He was hired by the Roxxon company to ruin the Hulk's public image by creating disasters and swooping in to save the day. Zenmu used his hypnotic powers to persuade civilians and even close friends and allies of the Hulk to turn their backs on him. Thankfully though, the Hulk managed to break free of his control, and he actually completely destroyed Zenmu. Coming in at number 2 is Man-Thing. Ted Sallis was a scientist first assigned to something called Project Sulfur, in which he created a serum that made people immune to all toxic biochemicals. But it also, unfortunately, turned them into monsters. This serum was called SO2. However, Sallis had to flee from forces who desired his formula for their own nefarious purposes. He injects himself with the serum, but after crashing in a specific swamp and dying, he is transformed into a swamp creature through a combination of this formula and magical forces existing in the area. As Man-Thing, Ted is practically invincible. He can be destroyed, but as long as there is vegetation on Earth, he grows back his body. Depending on the situation, his super strength is possibly limitless. He has fought against the Hulk, the Thing, and the entire Marvel Champions team. Man-Thing also has the ability to teleport around the Earth using Nexus points. He can breathe underwater and can't really be held captive, as he can just ooze past objects, like if you locked him behind bars, he can just walk through the bars. The last of his powers consists of detecting emotions. Positive emotions make him feel calm and reserved, but but negative feelings make him go ballistic, making him secrete an ooze that can burn almost anything, including Luke Cage's skin. Man-Thing is also capable of controlling the nexus of all realities. During Fear itself, Man-Thing's power increased, releasing him from the bond to the nexus of all realities and allowing him to teleport wherever he wishes at will, and later his powers grow so great that he is able to manipulate reality. Also, Man-Thing is one of the few beings shown to be naturally immune to the Marvel Zombies plague. And in at number 1 is Jormungand. According to Norse legend, Jormungand is the son of Loki and the Jotunheim sorceress Angerboda. Realizing the danger that Jormungand posed to the gods of Asgard, Odin, the ruler of the realm of Asgard, banished Jormungand to the depths of the ocean of Earth, or Midgard. Now Jormungand not only survived in the oceans, but grew to an incredible size. At his full size, Jormungand was big enough to encircle the entire planet, and Jormungand became known as the Midgard Serpent. It was prophesied that on the day of Ragnarok, when it is said that most of the gods of Asgard will pass away, that Odin's son Thor will kill the Midgard Serpent, but Thor himself would die as a result of the Midgard Serpent's venom. So, we know the Midgard Serpent's venom can kill Asgardian gods, but by compressing his coils around the planet, he could also magically cause storms, earthquakes, and other disasters. He was also usually in an ethereal form, making him invisible and intangible to humans, but if he came out of this form fully, he would destroy a lot of stuff on Earth. So it's kinda good that he stays that way. In battles he has had with Thor, only a part of him ceased to be ethereal, and that one part was absolutely massive. Becoming visible also froze time while he and Thor battled. Thor and beings as strong as him are the only ones capable of defeating the serpent, but Thor is the only one to have actually done it. Coming in at number 10 is Frankenstein's monster. In case you have never heard of Frankenstein's monster, the creature was originally the creation of English author Mary Shelley, who wrote a novel in 1818 titled Frankenstein that tells the story of Victor Frankenstein, a young scientist who creates a sentient undead creature in a scientific experiment. It's actually a very deep and somewhat moving story. Now, the Marvel Universe version of Frankenstein and his monster isn't too different. In 1788, Victor Frankenstein left his family estate in Geneva, Switzerland to study natural science. Victor became obsessed with the idea of recreating life and began robbing graveyards in order to acquire body parts that he then stitched together and subjected to chemical treatments and electrolysis. But it horrified the scientist and he fled, leaving the monster alone in the world. Frankenstein, being an undead being, is essentially immortal and immune to disease. He can lift around 10 tons, he has superhuman stamina and durability, and he can replace any lost limbs with other people's limbs, which is both creepy and kinda cool. Number 9, Vampire by Night. I honestly didn't know there was also a vampire by night, and she's actually related to the werewolf by night. Nina Price, the niece of Jack Russell, the werewolf by night, is also an ancestor of Grigory Russoff. Nina's mother, Lisa Russell, was a victim of the same curse as Jack Russell, except things changed for this branch of the family when an altercation with a sorcerer named Glitter Knight freed Lissa from being a werewolf. Lissa married and had Nina with a wealthy man named Mr. Price. Unfortunately, the werewolf curse continued to Nina, but at some point, Nina was attacked by a vampire, which altered the curse for Nina and caused her to be both a werewolf and vampire in one. By day, Nina Price seemed to be a normal human, but once the sun goes down, she becomes a vampire, which is a good way of getting around the whole sunburning weakness. Due to the werewolf's curse though, Nina does become a white wolf during the full moon, but she uses her father's money and status to reserve a zoo or park, caging herself there until the full moon was over and she was no longer an animal. However, Nina had no problem using her supernatural abilities to harm criminals. Rightfully so. Nerds, if you are enjoying this video, I call upon you to hit the like button. It is all you have to do to show us your support here at Top 10 Nerd. Number 8, Reptile. While accompanying his parents on an archaeological dig, Humberto Lopez and his family discovered a fossilized amulet. Humberto eventually took possession of this fossil, which activated one day when a rock slide occurred, nearly burying him. Berto ran as fast as he could, and once he was far away, he noticed that his legs had transformed into those of a dinosaur. That's because the amulet that Berto and his family discovered was magically created by the Hag of the Pits to imbue its bearer with the abilities of prehistoric animals as well as empathic communication with them to defend said animals when the time came. His powers were also later augmented with pin particles to allow him to alter his size. Now originally, Reptile could only transform certain parts of his body into different aspects of dinosaurs, like the wings of a pterodactyl, the tail of a stegosaurus, the head of a parasaur, and the legs of a velociraptor, that kind of thing. He could also only maintain one transformation at a time. He could even just enhance his senses like vision and hearing, but eventually Reptile was able to fully transform into a complete dinosaur or even other prehistoric animals like insects, which gave him enhanced healing. Number 7. Sasquatch. Although the Sasquatch or Bigfoot in the real world is a folklore monster, in Marvel he is actually Walter from down the street. Walter Lankowski or Sasquatch is actually a gamma mutate. The Canadians started to focus on gamma research after meeting Bruce Banner, and then specifically he focused on the Hulk after learning Hulk was indeed Bruce. While on leave from MIT, Dr. Lankowski began working on a gamma radiation experiment that could create a being like the Hulk, only under more controlled circumstances. Being bombarded by massive amounts of gamma radiation, Walter turned into a huge, hairy, light brown creature with similar abilities to the Hulk, and after rampaging, he learned how to retain his intelligence and personality while transformed, joining Alpha Flight as their heavy hitter. More recently, he actually got possessed by Doc Samson and is now green, and technically Sasquatch is Samson, so I hope that's not too confusing, because I'm confused. Number 6. Electro 1. Alright, Electro 1 should probably be on a list of robots, but his story is so classic monster-like that I just wanted to include him. A scientist named Wilbur Poole set out to create the world's most advanced computer, but a bizarre accident caused the computer to become sentient. It then brainwashed Poole and forced him to build a body to house itself. When Poole had finished the body, the computer moved itself to the robot and went out into the world, rampaging, like they always do. Electro, as the people called it, came into conflict with the US military, who proved no match for the numerous powers of the robot, which included psionic force fields, gamma ray blasts, atomic manipulation of living creatures, and object levitation, while also having a robotic metal body. He was eventually defeated by his creator and then eventually found by Reed Richards, who shrunk him down and set the robot to work in the Baxter Building. Electro 1 also joined the Fing Fang 4 and fought off the warlord Tim Boo Ba, which is a great sentence. Then he got confused for the villain Electro and was arrested. You should have seen that one coming though, I don't know. Number 5. Goom. Goom, the thing from Planet X. In the Tales of Suspense number 15 from October 1960, the astronomer Mark Langley wanted to see if there was life on a planet he discovered called Planet X. So he tried to communicate with anyone through a transmitter. Unfortunately, the alien known as Goom received the transmission and followed the signal back to Earth, arriving in his ship to conquer the world. In a show of power against the world's leaders, Goom showed off some of his abilities and technology, like a time machine that could reverse someone back into a baby, a weapon that could destroy an entire mountain, or a force field that protected him from any weapon. He was even able to lift an entire city with his mind, but thankfully, the other members of his race, who were all pacifists, were contacted. They came, arrested Goom, and took him back to their planet. Number 4. Godzilla. Did you know Godzilla was a part of Marvel? He was even a part of Earth 616. Starting in May 1977, Marvel Comics published comics all about Godzilla. As some of you may know, Godzilla came to be during a Pacific nuclear bomb test in the 1950s, in Tokyo in 1956. But then, the monster became trapped in ice off the coast of Alaska. It then resurfaced in the modern day, and S.H.I.E.L.D. put together a Godzilla squad to try and take on the massive creature. It went rampaging all over America, doing battle with S.H.I.E.L.D., the Champions, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, the West Coast Avengers, a massive Red Ronin robot, and more. Using his incredible nuclear atomic fire breath, insanely durable hide, regenerative power, and its surprising intelligence. Number 3. The Hulk. Probably the most well-known monster in Marvel Comics, if you wanted to call him that. The power of the Hulk is almost unmatched. You know the story. When testing a gamma bomb he developed, Bruce Banner rushed out into the blast radius to save Rick Jones. He was blasted with an insane amount of gamma radiation, turning him into a hulking, gray-colored beast with incredible amounts of strength, durability, stamina, regeneration, speed, adaptation, and the ability to seemingly never pass away. His rampages are the things of legend, and the Hulk was the original reason all the Avengers even came together in the first place. One of the best characters Marvel has under its roof. Number 2. Mangog. The Mangog is the physical manifestation of the strength and hatred of a billion beings belonging to a race that was completely wiped out by the ruler of Asgard, Odin. To call him powerful is a bit of an understatement. While Thor has managed to defeat Mangog, usually by tapping into the omnipotent potential of the Odin Force, as long as hate exists in the universe, Mangog will exist and grow more powerful as hate grows and festers, even during battles. He's gone toe-to-toe with Odin, who is one of the most powerful beings in the universe. In fact, Mangog is one of the few beings that Odin is actually afraid of. He's fought both Thor and Odin at the same time to the point that they were completely incapacitated. He swatted away Mjolnir like a fly and taken star-destroying weapons to the face with ease, and he's even survived being thrown into the sun with only a minor char. Number 1. Shuma Gorath. Yes, it is a giant tentacled eyeball, but hold off on the laughter because Shuma Gorath the Destroyer, the Conqueror of Midnight, the All-Killer of the Dawn, is a ridiculously ancient being and greatest of the old gods, or many angled ones. Among his many powers is the ability to communicate with and control others nearby and across dimensions. He can create and direct powerful blasts of mystical energy and affect transmutations on a planetary scale. His skin alone is difficult to damage even with the most powerful of magic. While his form seems silly, it's actually only a shell containing his power, and he can alter his appearance and his true form is not even visible to humans. He can destroy multiple galaxies solely through his aura pressure, and Shuma Gorath also has the ability to destroy realities. He is most powerful in his home dimension, just like others of his kind, and only part of his power has actually appeared on Earth. And with the stuff he has done, that should tell you just how powerful he is.